We're celebrating President's Day and keeping America great with an all-star panel, a really special one here because they're all members of the families of three former presidents. Joining me now is John Taft. He's the CEO of Wealth Management, author of Stewardship, and great-grandson of President William Howard Taft. Also Michael Reagan, author and son of President Ronald Reagan. And Margaret Hoover, CNN political consultant, Republican strategist, and great-granddaughter of President Herbert Hoover. Welcome to you all. You must all, I don't know, feel a bit tingly on this day, don't you? Especially when you all get together. I mean, it's like a little club, isn't it?
You know, I was saying in the green room, exactly. I said, you know, it'd really be nice if the family members of first families that are living really get together, have their own party at the White House for a charitable cause that they like, instead of always listening to the fathers and whomever get together and do something good for the world. You know, we had to live it or are living it as we speak.
Margaret, do you strut around today or everywhere you go? I think you're in Miami. Do you strut around letting everybody know that you are related to a president? Is it a special day for you?
No, I mean, it's a special day for all Americans, Piers, but it's pretty watered down by the time you get to fourth generation. So we respect our heritage. Like all Americans, we respect the presidency and the institution. But no, there's no strutting. Although we all do take a moment to really reflect on the legacies of the presidents we're related to. And I think that's what we're delighted to share with you and your viewers.
Well, let's get to some of this legacy, because John, now I've got you here. Your great-grandfather was the heaviest president in U.S. history, and the reason that is significant now is all the conjecture over Chris Christie, obviously, whether he is basically too big to be president. Your great-grandfather weighed in at 340 pounds, so pretty much heavier than Chris
heavy
Christie.
For those days in particular.
Right. Let me cut to the quick. Is it true he once got stuck in a White House bathtub? Because you're the guy who must know the answer.
Yeah, that is a timely question to which there is an answer thanks to an article posted recently on Yahoo. The answer is no.
Really?
He was never stuck in a White House bathtub. But
you're ruining one of the great stories in American presidential history.
But here, I'll give you a lesser one. He was, in that case, able to construct a larger bathtub to avoid getting stuck, and may have constructed larger bathtubs elsewhere as well. But he did not get stuck in the White House.
Do you care about Chris Christie's weight? Should it be an impediment to him being president?
I do not. I mean, if you need a proof point of the fact that being a large individual is no impediment to serving in high office, my grandfather is that proof point. I mean, he was Governor General of the Philippines from 1900 to 1903. Don't you think that was an arduous task? Secretary of War, President of the United States, and then Chief Justice. 30 years, and he weighed over 300 pounds throughout that period. Chris Christie can be elected and serve as President of the United States.
Michael, let me talk to you about guns, because I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people reference your father when it comes to guns. Because although he was the first to publicly endorse the NRA as a president, he was a gun owner himself, he also endorsed an assault weapons ban. What do you think he would have made of the current debate right now?
Oh, I think the current debate, he would have, if he'd been president of the United States and leading, he probably would have pulled all the sides into the White House and said, where are the areas of agreement? What are the things we can do to make it safer in the schools and safer for the children and everybody else in the United States of America? But we don't have that going on truly in Washington, D.C. at this moment. Instead, it's just debate that is going on. But something else, though, he probably would have brought up. He said, why wasn't this being spoken about with all the black children being killed in Chicago every single week, or the children being killed in South Los Angeles every single week? Why does it take white kids being killed in a school in Connecticut for there to be a debate on gun control when there was no debate on gun control with that many children and more being killed on the streets of Chicago each and every week? I think that's a story that really needs to be talked about. And the President of the United States just now went to Chicago, but that's only because the little girl who happened to march in the parade when he was being sworn in happened to be killed in his neighborhood just a few days after that.
No, I think it's a perfectly valid point. Margaret, let's go through the numbers here. Number 27 was President Taft. Number 31 was Hoover. Number 40 was Reagan. Let's talk about number 44 for a moment. I'm interested in what you think about this Tiger Woods golfing weekend. I mean, the idea of Barack Obama slipping away with Tiger Woods on a secret weekend is actually quite alarming, given what we know about how Tiger Woods has spent many weekends over the years. But when it comes down to whether he should release a picture and so on, I've got a bit of sympathy, and I wonder whether you do, because in the end, you know, the skeet shooting picture, for example, when he didn't release it, he got hammered. When he finally released it, he got hammered even harder. Can you win as president with this kind of thing? And should the American media, on behalf of the public, cut the president a bit of slack?
Well, the governing principle with all presidents and the media is transparency and keeping open lines of communication. And it's certainly the problem that President Obama ran into isn't that he went golfing with Tiger Woods. And I'm certainly not worried about President Obama. He and Michelle have a very, very strong marriage, as we all know. So I don't think Tiger Woods is going to be influencing the president's behavior in any way. But what the press corps did seem to say is there just hasn't been open communication with them about this weekend. And I think that was the brunt of their complaint. I think every president struggles with this, and every president strives to have as much transparency as possible, but still protect their privacy, and that balance is constantly a give and take.
Back now on my President's Day panel with the families of former presidents, John Taft, Michael Reagan and Margaret Hoover. Michael, what do you think your father would have made of the paralysis in Washington over the last couple of years, and what would he have done about it?
You know, when he put together the tax break of 1981, he called Tip O'Neill to the White House, had dinner. Tip O'Neill went back the next day to his staff and said, I'm going to support Ronald Reagan, and I'm going to carry the tax relief bill to the Congress. Now, he had 40 blue dog Democrats in the Congress would have voted with my father, but he had to carry the water. And when they asked Tip O'Neill, what is it the president promised you? What did he say? Tip O'Neill said, you know, he never talked about taxes all night long. He talked about the greatness and goodness of America and her people. Before I knew it, I'm having a glass of wine with the president, and I'm telling Irish stories. You need to bring people together in Washington. You really do. And that really is not happening. The paralysis is everywhere. I mean, it's not just one party or the other party. It's really everywhere. I mean, nobody's asking Harry Reid why you haven't had a budget in 4 years. Nobody's holding his feet to the fire like they're holding Republicans' feet to the fire who have passed a budget. So I think the media also has to be equal opportunity, saying, listen, if I'm going to go after Republicans on this side, Harry, where's your budget?
Margaret, would your great-grandfather, would he have looked at this and thought it's the Republicans' fault, that they are too splintered, that the Tea Party element that crept in a couple of years ago split the party too much and there's no coherent voice? What would he have made of the modern-day Republican Party?
What I do know about Herbert Hoover is that he did have a very successful first part of his term passing bipartisan legislation for trade, the Smoot-Hawley bill, which many people have reflected on since the Depression. Some suggest that it was a major contributor to some of the economic slowdown. Others suggest that it's been vastly overstated. But ultimately, passing bipartisan legislation comes down to a president's ability to lead and to work with the Congress. And Hoover had been in Washington. He'd been Secretary of Commerce for 8 years before he became president, and food administrator under a Democrat, President Wilson, beforehand. So if you have bipartisan relationships on both sides of the aisle, he was very close with President Truman, very close with Joe Kennedy. He had relationships that span both sides of the aisle. Presidents work their will. Successful presidents are able to get bipartisan legislation through. And I think you can look at Hoover's history and maybe extrapolate from that how he might view the current situation and polarization in Washington.
And John Taft, would your great-grandfather go along with that, do you think? Do you think that the bipartisan style of previous presidents is just for whatever reason not happening right?
Well, my great-grandfather struggled in his relations with Congress because he really was a reluctant president. Didn't want to be president, agreed to run for president because Roosevelt asked him to and because he felt like he needed to serve his country in that way. He wanted to become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which he did. But I think one of the legacies of his presidency is he struggled to get anything done. And in fact, I think his term probably resembled what's going on in Washington a little bit right now.
Let me ask all of you, before we wrap this up, I'll start with you, John, if I may. What do you think is the primary purpose of a president of the United States?
I think it's the same as the leader of any organization. A president needs to set a vision, and then he needs to step back and let others meander as best suits their purpose towards that vision. I think, Michael, one of the things your father was so good at was doing just that. He was able to articulate a vision and then step back and let other people take us there.
Would you agree with that,
I would agree with that. You know, one thing people need to remember, there was a placard on his desk. No telling what a man can accomplish if he doesn't worry who gets the credit. Today, we have too many people trying to take credit for everything, and they're getting nothing done. Where Ronald Reagan didn't mind allowing Mikhail Gorbachev, in fact, to take credit when he needed to take credit to lift him up.
That's a great example. Margaret, what would you say is the point of being a president?
I agree with Mr. Taft and I agree with Mr. Reagan. I think you set a vision for the country. You lead the country towards that vision, both the American people and the Congress. Remember, the president is but 1/3 of the federal government, the executive branch. He has to get along with the Congress or they're not going to get anything done. And then, of course, we're forgetting the critical function of defending the borders. And in a time of urgent national security needs, the president is the commander-in-chief of the United States military. And that's not something that that Herbert Hoover had to deal with. Fortunately, it was more of a peacetime in between World War I and World War II, although he was deeply involved in the rehabilitation of Europe after World War II and also during World War I.
Well, well said, all of you. We've reached a point of presidential family consensus. Perfect way to round things off. John Taft, Michael Reagan and Margaret Hoover, thank you all very much. You should all get together and have a party.
Thanks,
Every
Piers.
president family member. I'll come and pour the drinks.